All right. Hi, guys. Welcome back to this month's hub pillar, which is healing and energy, one of my personal favorites. And when I thought about who I was going to interview this month, my dear friend Liz, who I met in India about a year and a half ago, popped into my mind straight away. She's got a really fascinating story of how her journey took, I guess, a complete 180 turn. To a UK corporate go-getter to chanting in India for a year. But I won't spoil it for you guys. I'll let Liz take over. So thank you so much for joining us, Liz.
Thank you for having me, Alex. It's lovely to connect with you again. As you say, it's been a while since we met in India back in 2017.
Yeah, I know. So I think, first of all, I guess maybe let's start with your life in the UK and what that kind of looked like and what drove you to be in India and why you felt the pull there and how your life changed there.
Yeah. So when I met you, I was actually in mid-yoga transition. So going back to the beginning of my kind of you said 180 shift in my life was 2015. And I'd been working as a solicitor in London. I was 32. And really it was at the end of my tether. I'd been suffering with depression, panic attacks, anxiety. And what really got me to wake up to the fact that this wasn't, an acceptable way of just plodding through life was I got acid reflux. And I'm a Taurian and I'm a massive foodie. And suddenly I wasn't able to enjoy food, wine at all. And it was this real shock to be debilitated in some way. And I remember sitting in the doctor's surgery, just, I had to keep going back to get medication. And I was like, I am so miserable. I mean, they asked me how I was and I fell apart, which, I had enough. I could tap in enough that I knew that wasn't normal or healthy for someone at my age to be that, upset and just overwhelmed by everything. And then eventually, it just really started, that seed was planted in terms of, well, what can I do about it? And yoga had been becoming a saving grace. I'd been going every Sunday when I could get there to the gym, and it was a place where I could breathe. I just felt like I could relax there. Because as soon as I was interacting in my life, work, job, it just was full on pressure. Even socializing, when you live in London, it's play hard, work hard.
Yeah.
And yoga was the space I had to just rest with permission almost. I gave myself permission. And Vishva-Ji, our guru, he actually came to the UK in April 2015. And I did this yoga weekend with him. And it wasn't like yoga I'd ever done before. It was uncomfortable. There was lots of chanting. There was like holding postures for ages and breathing. And it was, I was emotional, but something clicked in me and I felt very strange as I left that weekend. And I said to my friend who I dragged with me because I was too scared to go alone, I said, I don't know what has happened. And I don't know if I enjoyed this weekend, but something's changed. And then I had a proper, breakdown at work, and then admitted to my boss that I just needed to get away. And the first place that came to mind was the ashram. And then from there, I went to the ashram and had this, stereotypical cathartic healing experience with like-minded people in this beautiful, crazy country, and found out about the 200 hours. So I went back in the September. I'd quit my job whilst I was traveling, and went back and did my 200 hours. And that was the start of this whole just new perspective on the way I could live life. And I was going from a very grey and depressed, desperate state. So to me, it was like, well, I've got to try this because I can't see any other alternative. It was just, the insights that it gave me and starting to give me into my stories, my limited beliefs, my patterns of behavior, which have come from deep-rooted programs from my life so far, from my childhood, from my experiences through my ancestors. All these things were talked about, but I didn't get them at the time. But he started to just draw my attention that there were things happening to me that I could firstly become aware of and secondly change.
Mm.
And so, like the type A overachieving lawyer that was still and still is in my veins, I was like, right, this is it. I'm going to be a yoga teacher. I'm going to spread this, knowledge and wisdom to the masses. I'm going to help people I know who are suffering like me back in England. And I came back in November 2015, launched my yoga business in the January 16.
Wow.
And it was amazing. It took off very quickly, and I did the lugging work, as I'm sure you know, of taking bolsters, blankets, blocks, mats, up and down stairs, moving furniture. And then eventually I got a studio space. And then, there's always bumps when you're self-employed. And I was working again back 7 days a week. And everything was, it had to work because I had to make sense of why I wasn't a lawyer with a secure job, with the pension. And I had to make sense of it for myself. And also I felt defensively to make sense of it for my family and to my friends who were all watching me turn into this vegetarian chanting, traveler, which I'd never been. I've always been the straightforward girl, go to university, get the good job,
Right.
So it was a complete shock to me, never mind to everybody else. It was like, what's happened to Liz? And then that adrenaline, that pressure, it's still the same, pressure I was under when I was a lawyer. But it felt more personal because obviously this was now my new identity. I'd gone from lawyer to yoga teacher. And then I realized in 2017, I was doing it all again. I'd built up something on the wrong motivations, not wrong as in, but just not on aligned, authentic motivations. And they were trapping me from actually developing my own spiritual practice. And with much regret and shame of leaving my students and my studio and the woman I was working with, I had to get honest and real that there was something more for me. And that's what led me back to India. And interestingly, I know we're going to talk about the feminine energy, but I'd gone from, I wanted a six pack. That's why I was going to yoga and Pilates, and the six pack never happened. And at some point during my practice, for those years from 2015 to 17, I realized I was praying as I was doing sun salutations. I was like giving thanks from my heart to my body, giving thanks to the earth, giving thanks to the divine as I was moving my body for the privilege of doing just that. And it really took me by surprise when I realized I'd kind of fallen into this devotional, spiritual existence because I was so defensive against religion and spiritual brainwashing. I mean, everyone's brainwashed by some programs, I understand now, but so it was this huge call to find out what this was, what was giving me a different connection and intention, to want to practice yoga and it just was, it's like that slow call of something, and it was coming from the divine feminine, because one of the main things that happened before I left, so kirtan, devotional chanting, I think for a Westerner, it's the scariest looking form of yoga ever. Everyone's sat clapping and chanting, and maybe it's Hare Krishna, and we've got stereotypes around that. I personally did from how I was raised in the UK, but it was the only thing left that I was scared to teach because I can't sing. I'd been, told I couldn't sing. My whole family are amateur dramatic performers and singers, and I was the clever one. I had my role in my family, and so I was always embarrassed to sing in public. But I went to a kirtan workshop in Manchester just before I flew out to India, so I already knew I was going back to India. And the couple, she had, for the first time I went to a kirtan where someone was singing in my range, low range, and I could just belt out the songs. And by that point, obviously, I'd done a lot more weird and wonderful things, so I was just more comfortable letting go. And there was this one song to the Divine Mother, and it just made me beam. Your pop star songs would when you were a kid. It just lifted my heart. And then when I got back to India, that was when I made the connection because I sang it at that first kirtan.
I still remember it, and it's so interesting for me hearing this story because I had no idea that kirtan was new for you. Like seeing you at the ashram and seeing you getting the whole YTT on their feet while you sit there and sing that song. It's like I honestly thought you were a singer your whole life. So that's so interesting.
No, I mean, I'd enjoyed kirtan, and obviously I'd been in that environment before in the 200 hours in my ashram, so it wasn't as unnerving for me at the start of the 300 hours. And I love the ashram. It's definitely a place where I've always felt safe.
Yeah.
But no, that was the first time I had led a couple of kirtans in Southport before I left, but with other people.
Right.
So I was like, softly, but to do it in front of you guys, you were my yoga peers, you were my new family.
Yeah.
And my heart I don't even know to this day what got me off the floor to volunteer. I just knew I kind of wanted to start hard and just, do the things that scared me is what I was there for.
Right.
And I just remember sitting there, breathing, thinking, okay, I don't know what note's going to come out of my mouth, but I'm just going to have to go for it, because that's where my voice is strongest, is if I'm loud. And I just took a breath, started singing, and then I had my eyes closed so I couldn't really see you all. And then when I opened them and picked up the pace, everyone just went for it. And it was like I'd been holding back this energy, keeping it slow. And then as soon as and it was an extraordinary experience, as soon as I picked up the pace, everybody just went for it, and I wasn't expecting it.
Right.
And it was a really special, energetic experience. And then it was the first time as well. At the end, I'd sort of started to see colour, because I don't generally see colour as energy or anything. And I was just, overwhelmed by the whole experience.
Wow.
Yeah. And I felt so connected, to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me is what's led me down this interesting road. Is nothing in a yoga or in a life practice has made me feel that open in my heart center. And that is the home of the Divine Mother. It's the divine feminine energy, and that open heart, it's just, when you feel these moments of just complete and utter bliss and gratitude, it is addictive. It's like a drug. You want to know more, or you want to have more of it. And that was the signs that I had to keep chanting, and that was the start really of me connecting more to the feminine energy.
And so from that moment then, once you experience this place of complete bhakti bliss, how would you say again that your journey shifted again, and did that take you down a different route, and if so, where?
Honestly, I'm a control freak. I was a lawyer. I had a steady path. And then I became a yoga teacher, and I knew what yoga teaching looked like. I knew that you get a studio and you teach yoga. Didn't happen for me. It's been a complete, blocked labyrinth at every turn. And at that point, when we finished our 300 hours, I'd gone to that 300 hours desperate for answers, hoping that the qualification was going to give me the next step of what I should be teaching, being more advanced as a yoga teacher. And I think I knew that wasn't what was happening. So I left just feeling like that didn't give me any answers. And now I'm privileged enough to be traveling for the next year, but also terrified of it, because I'd never been free to drift, which is what I saw it as. And Vishva said to me, he's like, just keep chanting. So I kept chanting, led kirtan, loved it. And then I found a sound course. And it has then shifted since then, but I just want to cover the sound course because, in the West we have a very defensive attitude to chanting. And the throat chakra, I'm getting croggy in the throat as I say it. The throat chakra is one of the most powerful ways to move energy and to really confront a lot of your fears and inhibitions. I'm British, stiff upper lip, close everything, close everything down, don't express, have the poker face. We've got that awful mantra, keep calm and carry on. And it's all about repressing expression. And for me, I sit on the other side of some very powerful experiences just through chanting. And on this sound training course, it was all about nada yoga and vocal sound. But that's when I had my first, I suppose, pleasant Kundalini experience. So I will just explain what Kundalini is, if for those who may not know. But Kundalini energy is the Shakti energy. It's the divine feminine energy that rests at the base of the spine. And it's sometimes symbolized by a coiled snake waiting to rise up. So it can help with the imagery to picture where this is going. But it moves, once your chakra center your energy is I won't say open, because we're all open, but once it's sort of moving in flow,
Activated.
there's alignment.
Yeah.
And I wasn't aware any of this was happening to me at the time. I just want to make this really clear. This all caught me by surprise. So I've been working on yoga for a while, but so the Kundalini energy can rise through the system once you're sort of open and in alignment. And when you've tapped into waking that Shakti energy up, and that's why this voice work is so powerful. Throat chakra is connected to sacral chakra, feminine powerhouse of creativity. But I had been connecting to Lalita, been studying her, interested in her, and she's the Hindu goddess for sexual pleasure, sexual power. And in this group of it was over 20 people in a room on my training course, we were singing to Lalita. And the week before, my teacher, or a few days before, my teacher had like an experience. She had gone into bliss while she was leading with this chant, and it's the first time I'd ever seen that. And I think because I'd seen it and she explained it, my conscious mind, could make space for me then having that experience. And then the next time we sang it, I then suddenly felt this huge overwhelming energy rocking in my pelvis. I was having to move, I couldn't stop it. My hands are always the first to go, so my hands were like frozen with energy. And that had been happening to me in yoga for a lot of years, feeling it in my hands but not really sure what it was. I'd done Reiki 1 to kind of just know a bit more. But then so I was like pulsating in this room full of lots of people singing Lalita. And then this energy is just building and building, and it's sexual energy, and it was like pleasure pain energy, and I was starting to make sounds, and a British woman in public, and it was all very, and then the mind started kicking in, and then my teacher could see as she was leading that this was happening to me, and she just said, Liz, stay with the sensation. So I just remember picking up my hands and feeling into the energy in my hands, and then allowing this just to get even more intense. And I was literally consumed by energy. And I wouldn't say that it was bliss, I was really like, it was like this really frustrating sexual energy. And but I was scared, and then ultimately I stopped it and came back down into my body. And this was the point for me where I realized, hang on, there's a parallel problem here that I'm suffering with. I'm a control freak, I'm scared, but I was unable to have orgasms very easily. And I realized, and I was mortified by this realization, to be honest, that my lack of ability to surrender to orgasms in sexual experiences was the same as my lack of ability to surrender in a spiritual experience. And if I wanted to go further and explore these greater energetic experiences, I needed to deal with this issue. So after the sound training, I went back to the mountains, and I was in Dharamshala, and within 2 days, I found a feminine awakening workshop, 4-day immersive, and I was searching continuously to connect with the divine feminine energy. And that's where I met 2 now friends of mine, Steph and Jojo. But we did a 4-day immersive women's circle healing, and I'd never really been in those settings before. But one of the things we had to work through was working through Kali. And Kali energy, she's the terrifying mother. She's the mother that will rip your arm off and pull you out of the way of an oncoming car. When you see mothers scream their kids out of a road to avoid an accident, Kali's that mother. She'll rip your arm off if she has to save you from the ultimate death. And basically she's freeing yourself from your ego and from your limiting patterns, but she doesn't do it. There's no, there, sweetheart, I'm going to hold you and it's all going to be okay.
Right.
You will cry and bleed and,
scream and kick and shout.
Yeah. And it will, and that energy I knew about, as a conscious theory, but honestly, it's been what's happened to me for the last couple of years of my life. And it's every time I think I've turned a corner and learned something about myself and think, okay, I've done enough work now, Mum. She's like, no,
okay, I'm done now.
For you to look at.
Right.
Yeah. So we had to do this Kali exercise in a group, and one of the teachers, Steph, she took us through, and it was we were lying there meditating on the rape of the earth, on the rape of the women that we know, on the rape of our sisters. It was just this really dark energy. And I have someone in my family line who was raped, and I knew about it as a young girl, but I'd never really connected that experience to me being a victim of it somehow, because it never happened to me in this physical body.
Directly.
And yeah, and Vishva-Ji had always said to us in the ancestral healing back in the ashram, you know, we carry the trauma of our ancestors. And I, you know, it made a nice theory, but until this experience, I really hadn't had a physical, energetic experience of it. But anyway, suddenly, you know, I made myself go into that experience that my family member will have had. And I felt just this anger, this unexpressed, violent rage in my body as I'm with other women who are also starting to, you know, cry, scream, moan, you know, really get physical with their bodies as a way of moving the energy. It's the most primal, wild and dirty, sweaty experience of my life. I'd never, you know, I mean, to get on this video, I've washed my hair and I've put makeup on, you know, I've not we don't let ourselves be seen either by ourselves or by other people that raw and that
Right.
you know, just wild. And it got to the point where, you know, there was so much pain moving through me, partly because of I say my relative, but also, you know, just, I know so many women that have been raped and sexually
Right.
assaulted, and I was scared, you know, traveling through India, because you read what you read. And also I remember getting to 16 and being grateful and relieved I'd never been sexually assaulted in my life. That was
Right.
somehow the story. And, you know, think of the newspapers when we were growing up. It's all about, you know, the pedophiles and the rapists. And as a woman, I think we just feel, or can feel, I don't want to put all women's in boat, but we can feel more threatened just by walking out of our front door. So
Exactly.
anyway, all this, yeah,
And
this
I feel,
unexpressed fear.
yeah, and I
Go on.
feel like we do all have the right to feel anger at the fact that there is, you know, there is this high chance, like it's sad to say, but there is this high chance that we can have our sexual rights taken from us. And in, you know, in some countries, in particular in India, it's more common than not to not have rights over your own, you know, sexual rights, and let alone sexual pleasure, you know.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
it's that collective wounding that we've been carrying
exactly.
for centuries as well. And I don't say this lightly. The only reason I even can talk like this is just because I felt it. There's
Right.
still that cynical
It's that
lawyer
felt
voice in my
sense.
head saying, you know, you're being dramatic, you're being sensitive, you're making too much of this. But as soon as I move away from focusing just on that part of my mind, it's only one part of it, I focus on what I feel. That's when the release comes and the healing comes. And so what happened is, you know, after that wild experience, you know, so I want to share one of the other practices that we do in this work, because it's really, for me, it was again a real shift of how I saw myself, or how I was allowed to see myself. So we'd done all this work and everybody had like released rage, and we were exhausted. It was I used to run half marathons. It was way more intense than that. Like we were just
Wow.
exhausted with the release through movement, through, you know, just physicality and being in a group together. And then at the end of it, we split into pairs, and one woman was Shiva, the masculine energy, and one woman was Shakti, the feminine energy. And the Shivas stood at one end of the room, and they just had to stand there, no expression. I mean, they could look kind, and then just wait until you approach them and then hold you. And then the Shaktis had to be wild and, you know, animalistic and disgusting. I mean, we already were sweating and messy anyway, so we were hissing, you know, hissing and just taking out all that anger at that Shiva, at that symbol of patriarchy, you know. And it represses men as well as women. If there's men watching this, it's not men are bad, and it really wants to be clear about that, because, you know, men are raped and there's all sorts of assault and abuse on men because the feminine energy is repressed in our patriarchal system.
Right.
But for my
That's a really great
experiences,
way of putting it.
it is, you know, little boys can't cry, you know.
Yeah.
I just as a sideline, when I was a lawyer, a few months after I'd left, a male friend of mine, he had a breakdown, and when he contacted me, I just remember thinking it must have been so much harder for you than me, because women, we were allowed to have an emotional moment, but for a man to admit that he's not making it work in a man's world, I just thought was a whole other level of humility and vulnerability and sensitivity. So I have full respect to our, you know, brothers, partners, husbands, and the men that are also trying to make sense of this this way this world works.
Right.
But yeah, so Shiva and Shakti, we had this because we all have Shiva and Shakti in us. I have a very strong masculine side, but I'd repress the feminine.
Mm.
You know, it's like the mirroring of the patriarchy.
Mm.
But so this Shiva is stood there, this container energy, because that's what the balance of it is. The Shiva contains the crazy creative energy of the feminine.
Mm.
So Shiva stood at one end of the room. We're hissing and crawling and sliding and spitting and howling and just being disgusting and free like children. You know, if a child wants to be an animal, a lion, then it will embody that lion. And we were embodying these worst parts of us. And then we crawled to the feet of our Shivas, and then we're like literally spitting in their faces, like
Wow.
rage and whatever else. And the Shivas are just stood there holding space. And then I just remember falling into her arms and being held. And then she just said, I love you. I see you. And I just, you know, completely fell apart because, you know, you think about those moments when you're growing up or even in an argument with your other half. If you lose your shit completely, that's, you know, shame. How dare you be that angry, that expressive? Go and sit on the naughty step if you're a 3-year-old. You know, get over your emotions before. And there is something to that. We can't just attack people because we're wounded. But there's never been, in my experience, a space to actually go through that emotional release. And also in the spiritual practices, a lot of it is observe it, don't get drawn into it.
Right.
But
the
feminine practices that I've been working with are about embodying it. The only way that it will truly pass and release is when you are subsumed by this whole emotion. Allow it to pass, but you have to get it out of yourself. You know, it's not witnessing this rocky sea. It's actually allowing this expression to move through and out of you.
It's so interesting you say that, because I had a conversation only yesterday with a friend of mine who's reading a book, and she said the book was saying that any bad feeling that you have, or any bad thought, or just anything bad that you have, you know, say positive things to it. Like just keep saying like, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you, I love you. But then my argument with that was, yeah, that's fine, but I don't really think that's coming from an embodied place, because you're not allowing it to enter you. You're just saying, okay, it's fine, okay, you can go now because I love you. So there you go, off you go, off you go. And I was like, I don't know that I agree. So I'm so happy to hear you say that as well, that piece of embodiment, which I think that surpasses a lot of people, especially in the spiritual world, that spiritual bypass. You know, we don't work through the shit.
Everything's love and light.
Yeah.
It's really not.
Yeah, it's bullshit. Love and light is complete bullshit.
I've always choked on that as a phrase, again, because I'm British, and anything that gets a bit sappy and sentimental, I'm like, oh. But, you know, and I joke, but, you know, it is true. I spent a year in India. I spent a lot of time living in traveling spiritual communities, and there is a lot of bullshit there. And you know, and this is my latest perspective is spiritual work is anybody who's willing to take responsibility for themselves. You know, and it doesn't matter what you're chanting, where you're doing it, your relationship status, you know, your job. It's about what stories are playing out in your life. And are you taking responsibility for your part in them, regardless of whether you feel that you're the victim? I've had a huge victim story that I'm still, you know, always unraveling. But the gift of those opportunities is the insight to yourself. You know, when someone does something to you, I don't believe that you've brought it on yourself. I don't go that far in terms of the negative side of law of attraction, but I do think it's a learning opportunity, and there are terrible traumatic things that happen to people, but the great healing stories are coming from the people who've managed to turn that victim into insight and then move away from it through the experience. Not saying, you know, I'm not going to deal with that, or I just send that person love and light, but it's saying, well, why did they do that? What can I learn from that? And then being able to move on. So it's and hiding away in a community where you're not from because you've got the privilege, financial, whatever, is also a way of bypassing dealing with your problems.
Totally.
You know, I was sent home again this year to live with my family. And I'm very lucky with my family, and that's the other thing that's changed dramatically over the years. Now, since I've become more comfortable with who I am as a spiritual I didn't even know what my label is anymore, but as a spiritual seeker, I'm less defensive. So my relationships with my family are totally different, because I'm not sending out that energy of they don't believe in me, I don't believe in me,
energy.
yeah. And it's a lot more, if I can be honest that I'm vulnerable and I'm working things out, and people can go, oh, okay. I can hold space for that, of course.
Yeah,
And it is
exactly.
about being open, and not dressing things up, which is definitely as easy to do in the spiritual world as it was in the legal.
Yeah, exactly. So then how is that, that huge experience with Kali, I guess how is that, how did you grow from that, and where did that lead you to? And what's next?
Yeah, so again, it's not a short answer. From there, Carly is still with me. It's definitely still been, the fall of my ego happened again in about April, May time this year. It was actually May, around my birthday, where I realized my living arrangements in Hoi An weren't suiting me. I was compromising, settling like I always do. And this was in a friendship. I've also done it repeatedly in relationship. So that was a huge clunk on the head of, oh, you don't just do this with boyfriends, you do this with girlfriends too. Like,
right.
oh, yeah. And then I was teaching, just dropping classes, which I'd left my studio in the UK where I had community and I was investing in people and had community. I'd left that and was teaching dropping classes. And I was like, no, this isn't what happened.
Right.
And by that point, because of all the feminine experiences, I knew I wanted to focus more on that, but it also didn't feel like the right time. And honestly, I just had to admit defeat again, that I was being fear driven to stay independent, stay in Vietnam, to try and cobble together and make it work when financially it wasn't. And really the biggest fear I had to face was coming home to the UK feeling like a failure. 4 years down a spiritual path, have been a successful lawyer, had a business, and then to say, yeah, I left all that behind again and it still hasn't worked out financially for me. So it really felt like a clobber to my ego to face that biggest fear of being a failure, which was all just programming I was putting on myself, labeling, and to come home and live with my parents again. And actually, it has been the most healing time, because they've just held space for me and said, it's okay. We know that you're going through some, because what happens, just to make it clear, is when the Kundalini energy starts to work through your body, I've had a lot more experiences since in different settings. But it's opening you up to connect more as a spiritual being to your intuition, but also to your spiritual gifts. And I had always dabbled with tarot cards, just playful, never really knew what I was doing. I just always liked them. But in October last year, I started to just do them blind for people, old yoga clients of mine who I didn't know anything about. And they were saying, how did you know that? And I was like, I don't know how I know that. I'm just reading the cards and telling the story. So then it quickly became clear to me that I was opening up into an intuitive, again, I really don't have the labels for where I'm at right now, but this intuition, this channeling, this speaking side of me, because my throat chakra had been opened with the chanting. And it was, honestly, it's all been about clearing the heart, the throat, so that I can move into this next phase, and wherever that's leading to, I don't know anymore. And I've surrendered to trying to work it out with my rational mind. I'm just like, okay, this might open up, and I've had some very beautiful experiences already with dreams, where I've contacted the person in my dream and I've actually been picking up on an energy of what's going on for them. So I'll give one example. A friend of mine who I met traveling, she and I had some distance when I came back to the UK last year briefly, and I was really busy, and it had upset her because she missed me, and she's got her story about people moving on from her. And so we ended up talking about it, having a conscious chat, and it wasn't a fallout with a girlfriend. It was actually really lovely and brought us closer together, because she admitted her vulnerabilities. I understood and explained to her what was happening for me. But anyway, this time I've come home, and yes, we're still not actively in touch like we used to be. And I woke up, this is pretty soon after I got back to the UK, I woke up after a dream, and I was like, she was angry at me in the dream. And then her friend who I'd met, she did that Sharon Stone crossing her leg scene. And that wasn't the point, but the point was her legs were like anorexic skinny. Like I remember in the dream being like, oh, she's sick, this is the friend of the friends. So I messaged my friend and said, look, I had a dream last night that you were angry with me, and I know that we've not been in touch, so I just want to say I am thinking of you, but I also had this vision that the ex was anorexic skinny, not well. And my friend replied, she's like, you're a witch. She's like, I have been missing you, I am sad that we're not in touch, but I'm okay. That's not like last time. She's like, and my friend started making herself sick again this week. And this is a person who suffered with bulimia in the past. And I was like, oh, and this is the thing. We all have dreams. We're all accessing something on a subconscious or other realm. We just don't pay attention to it.
Right.
And that's, for me, what the divine feminine energy has started to open up. It's this deeper connection to my intuition and a deeper trust in myself that things that I'm experiencing, they may not make sense to my overqualified, rational, control freak mind, but they are making sense on other ways.
Right.
So as I say, I'm kind of in this cusp point, I think, where I'm opening up into more psychic, life coachy. I don't know. As I'm not going to try and make up words, but it's just a transition point for me. So I'm not teaching yoga because I know that that's using up energy unnecessarily, and I'm just trying to allow things to develop whilst taking right action. We have to put energy into something we want to create, but not with the same force or masculine energy that I've had before of this must work because, well, what if it doesn't, basically, which was why I set up my yoga business, was this has to work because it has to be successful financially for me to understand why I'm doing this and for me to prove to the world that I've not lost my marbles. And now I look back on those feelings of 2017. I'm like, well, now I'm talking about my dreams and I'm doing tarot, and there's a whole new spectrum of people, potentially wondering if I've lost my marbles, but I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
It's just what's happening through me, and it's a gift, and that's what I feel like. It's a huge gift, and it's far more exciting and rewarding than it was for me, sat at that desk back in 2015.
Amazing.
Just wondering where my life was going.
Yeah. Amazing. So then, I guess just to finish, thank you for that story, by the way. It gets better every time. I heard the first half in India, and this is like the back end, so I love it. But
there's so much more as well. That's the crazy thing, that I had to acknowledge when I got home. People's lives move on, and I think when you're a spiritual person and you're trying to follow a spiritual path, you kind of have to pull out of the real world. But when you then have to reintegrate, and that's been one of the hardest things for me, is to move back into the Western life and see everybody. I mean, we're all getting older, but see everybody else moving through these, milestones that I'm not, and there are things I wanted to experience in my life, but it's understanding, that it isn't about stepping stones. It's just allowing these experiences to happen. And I looked back at my last 4 years, because I've started trying to maybe write a book about all this, and I was like, this is extraordinary, and it's so much has happened to me that could happen to people over their whole lives. So you've really got to check in with yourself and just honor your experience, because it's so unique and special, and don't compare yourself to anybody else is the main thing I've learned, or I'm learning.
Yeah, epic. And I think too, just to finish, for someone that's kind of, I guess you're speaking to your fellow lawyers and corporate people, or just people that are scared to step out of the norm, how would you, I guess, what would be the first steps in exploring, the energy and healing in the easiest way possible? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if I go back to that closed down energetic person that I was of 2015, it had to start with me with yoga. It had to start with me with a practice that
so
made
there was
sense
a portal
to me physically.
Right.
Because I was a runner. I'd done a bit of meditation as a kid, but not much. So there were already enough cracks for me to step through into something that I felt safe in. The main thing I would say to anyone, whether they're a lawyer or even a spiritual seeker, there's a lot of harm, and you put yourself at risk, particularly with sexual vulnerabilities in this spiritual world. It's something I was in the back of my mind to say, but you can only heal yourself. No one else has more power than you to heal anything within you,
Amen.
especially if it's sexual.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people offering tantric services, and they can cause more harm, which is, we haven't got time for me to say more about that. But in terms of anybody who's closed down because of fear of the strange things, or the fear of opening up spiritually, just start with something where you don't have as much fear. So that could be meditation. There's plenty of mainstream mindfulness apps. But it could also be, I mean, for me, it has to be about movement of the body, because that's how I connect, is with feeling and sense and touch. So dance can be, a spiritual experience. But you've just got to start with something and let it work. Don't try and get anywhere with it. Just be disciplined enough to go regularly, meditate every day, 10 minutes, go to yoga as much as you can. And these things will unfold. I had no idea. I didn't make any of this happen, is what I'm trying to say. There's no way I would have got on the yoga mat. In 2015, if you told me I'd be sat here now talking about my sexual experiences, talking about tarot cards, talking about dreams with a straight face and no alcohol, I would have thought you were off your rocker, never mind me. And I honestly don't think at that point where I would have had the strength or the energy or the belief that I could have got through that. I mean, I was pretty broken, and yoga was a foundation, and it's the most rewarding training I've done, with Vishva, because it really gives you this holistic, grounded understanding of who you are as a spiritual being, having a human experience. And it's the bridge between these two experiences, which the feminine comes in. We can be spiritual, we can sit and meditate, but the feminine is saying, get real with the world, get messy, get in your body. And for me, that's now where I'm at, is I've gone through the grounding of theory, of a practice that's very holistic, but I'm now moving into my unique, understanding and discovery of what that means through divine feminine energy. And
Amazing.
It's all healing.
Yeah.
The weirder it is, and that's what I would say. Whatever you're most scared of is the thing that you need to do.
That you need the most.
And chant, that's where that power has come through, because I've conquered a fear, and it's liberating to be on the other side of it. So whatever you're scared of the most in this weird and wonderful world, you've got resistance there for a reason, because it's probably going to unlock something deeper in you. But soft, kind.
Yes, approach with kindness. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Liz. Do you want to mention, before we sign off, I know Liz has an amazing YouTube channel that she does her full moon and new moon tarot readings. What's that one called, Liz?
I'm on YouTube, Embodied Feminine Energy, and I'm offering free readings for each zodiac sign in the month. And then there are new moon and full moon readings as well. So for me, it's a way to just express and open up more into what's a new phase of my life and my spiritual experience. And I honestly love it. I do personal readings as well, and it's like life coaching. For me, it's like the lawyer side of me, is getting to advise people on things that really matter, a spiritual and practical way of making decisions in their life. So yeah, I feel a nice harmony of skills is there for me with the tarot at the moment. But as I say, who knows what's coming next.
Forever shapeshift. Yeah, forever. We're all shapeshifters. So
exactly.
That's the beauty of life. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us this month on The Hub, Liz. I love your story, and I hope that that's touching all of you listeners out there to kind of step out of your comfort zone a little bit in the greater picture of healing and well-being for not only yourself but of all of humanity and the environment. So thanks so much. See you next time, Liz. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Bye.
Bye.